My name is Mike Baer. I'm your instructor for Sociology of Deviance this semester. I apologize I couldn't make it to the first day of class because the Sociology Conference is held in Chicago. We have no idea why it was held this late because virtually everyone was supposed to start teaching on Monday. So anyway, that's what's going on. I was at the conference and had to leave early, but still couldn't get back to Dallas on time to hold class the first day. We understand that for students, I know certainly it was the case, my case when I was a student, that you kind of like to shop around. You want to see what a class is about, see what the professor's like, and so on. And I'm trying to help you with that, giving you at least some basis, seeing to decide whether or not you want to take this class, and you don't have very long to make that decision. So I want to do something for you for the first day. So here it is. Now, the Sociology of Deviance. This will be the first time that I've taught it, but it's certainly something I'm very interested in and have given a lot of thought to. So it'll be an interesting semester, and one I expect will lead to much discussion, be thought-provoking, and so on. So I'm looking forward to teaching it. So a few things about the course itself, about Deviance. Deviance and social control. Those are some of the sort of the two main topics. We'll talk about crime a little bit, but that won't be the main focus. Not like it would be in a course on criminology. So yeah, the main topic is social deviance. Deviance obviously deviates. What does it deviate from? Well, typically norms, social norms and values. So by social norm, I think we all know what I'm talking about. But there's one mistake some people make when they think about norms. You might say something like, well, it's the norm for people to sit on the left side of the classroom. That's not exactly what is meant by norms, sociologically speaking. Norms are typically sort of moral standards, moral codes, expectations people have about behavior, but typically with a sort of moral commitment added to it. So it's a norm that people wear clothes in our society. When someone walks around without a shirt or isn't wearing enough clothes in particular contexts, let's say you go into the grocery store and someone's in a bikini or something like that, or God forbid that some man's walking around in a Speedo. Sorry about the unpleasant image that probably gave you. We know automatically, we feel it, that norms are violated, and those would certainly, for a lot of people, be seen as deviant acts. The deviation is from those norms. And that's the central way that we'll think about deviance. We'll talk about deviance this semester to talk about it sociologically. What that does, or what that means, at least for us, is there's certain things that are probably quite fascinating when we think of deviance and crime, that are interesting for a lot of different reasons, but are not particularly sociologically interesting. And I say that because the emphasis in this course might be on things that seem a little bit more mundane compared to deviance in the form of a serial killer or something like that. I know a course on serial killers. I've talked to other people who've taught courses like this in other colleges. Tends to get a lot of people. It's certainly an interesting topic, but not necessarily for sociological reasons. When acts are largely psychological, that's the strongest basis for them. maybe a little less interesting sociologically. Why do I say that? Well, think about this sort of example. If you remember, last summer, a really tragic event. It was in Las Vegas, I believe. A couple came into a Cece's Pizza and pretty much executed two law enforcement officers. And after they did that in front of everyone else, they put, I believe it was a Nazi flag on one of the officers, and then a "Don't Tread on Me" flag on one of the others, and then they left and shot someone else in Walmart before they were killed and committed suicide. Obviously deviant and criminal acts, but quite heinous. But what we see in that, think about the flags that were being used and what we know about the people. They were very upset with law enforcement. They felt like their rights were infringed upon, hence some of the symbols that they used. But the point is, there's larger social patterns, or there might be, and certainly in this case there were, that these forms of deviance might be a symptom of, and that's how they become, for sociological purposes, interesting, and why we'd study. We would ask, what are acts like this a symptom of something, and a symptom of something going on socially, such that maybe some of the sort of sentiments and grievances that these people had are in other people as well. It just so happened that this couple carried out particularly heinous form or acted out something particularly heinous given the grievances they had. But that tells us something about social patterns, and that's one of the reasons deviance has always been an important sociological topic. When you look at deviance, you don't just find out about deviant behavior per se, but you find out about the norms. You find out about the commonplace that taken for granted, the norms and values and beliefs that are particularly important in that society, that deviation is violates and makes prominent, makes it stand out when we see a deviant act. It brings to mind, or potentially does at least, the things that are that we assume and take for granted, but that we feel are being violated. It's not like, to go to my earlier example in the grocery store. I'm sorry, I'm going to invoke this again. It's not like we have some rules. Thou shalt not, if you're a man, walk into a grocery store wearing a pink leopard print Speedo. But there's some norms that we have that violates. Norms of propriety, norms of, I don't know, not being visual pollution, I guess, or that this is not an environment where that's appropriate, and so on. And that tells us about those things. So that's one of the reasons deviance is important in sociology and of interest, and that's one of the ways that we'll pursue it. So I wanted to tell you that. One other thing, well, actually two more things. To think about deviance this way, sociologically, it often does require taking a particular perspective. I don't want to kind of talk about this in a morally loaded way. That's not what I'm trying to get at. The book that you're supposed to get, it'll talk about this as sort of a relativistic attitude. Now, I want to sort of put that in perspective. Yes, we need to try to look at deviance in an objective, dispassionate way, because we're just trying to understand what it. We're trying to use it to understand the social life. Think about it this way. I think you've probably all seen some documentary of something in the animal kingdom, like maybe a cheetah or something chasing a gazelle. Think about this, and all I'm talking about, I'm not talking about deviance per se in this example, but I'm just talking about your sort of orientation to it. Maybe the gazelle is really cute, it's a little baby or something like that. Like, oh, how sweet. And then the cheetah runs after it, and you're even like, oh no, this is so horrible, don't. And the cheetah finally gets it, and it's brutal. It gets it by the neck and kills it. This sweet little baby gazelle or deer or whatever. And we have a lot of us would have sort of a negative reaction to this. We'd be sad, it'd almost be like an outrage. But then, when you stand back, you go, well, that's what the cheetah does. That's the way it lives. It's evolved to do this sort of thing. That's how the animal kingdom is. What I'm trying to get at is this sort of perspective of stepping back and looking at it as an objective, in as objective a way as possible, and putting your own sentiments and moral considerations and values aside, at least for the purpose of understanding the deviance. It's really important to be able to do that. Now, I'm not in any way saying to take a sort of relativistic outlook in a moral sense. I don't believe, on one hand, I don't think anyone can do that. We're always going to have some sort of moral evaluation, and it's actually good that we do. But try to separate these things, and a moral evaluation with empirical, objective, analytical evaluation or analysis. I mean, and if you want to evaluate things in this sort of moral way, and that's fine. Try to do so separately, so that at least so it doesn't cloud our ability to understand the particular instance. It's hard to do. Certainly, going back to that horrible thing that happened to the police officers in Las Vegas. But it can help us if we're like, well, what is the mindset of people, the people that did that? To even say they have grievances might imply to some people that they had some reason to do that. I mean, I'm sure they thought they had reasons, and even though we might know that those reasons were perverse and a bad thing, it still helps us to understand how they were seeing things. In case especially if these are, as I was saying, symptoms of larger ongoing patterns, because we don't want that to happen again, obviously. And then we can start to think about, once we know something about that, once we've sort of taken this disinterested perspective, then we can start also considering, well, I wonder if there's a pattern here that might be present elsewhere that tells us about something, some larger things going on. Whether it could be, for example, there's certainly a lot of today, and has been, and it seems to have been growing more and more over the last half decade or so, but a lot of suspicion about the government. And is could this be could this particular example be some sort of part of that trend? It may or may not, but that's an important question to ask. It would certainly be important for law enforcement people because they want to be safe and they want to do their jobs, and if there's sort of tendencies out there for people to be looking at law enforcement in an antagonistic way, that would certainly be of interest, and to all of us, obviously, since think about what law enforcement is to do for our society. It enforces our laws, and we would not have a very stable society. We wouldn't have the Constitution that we have if there wasn't someone who served the role of protecting and giving laws teeth, as you might say. And so there we would look at this sort of deviance in its potential ramifications through other aspects of society. So those are sort of the two main things I wanted to mention. Also, as far as when we think about crime is one particular form of deviance. What's important about that is it violates a particular set of norms, namely norms that have been codified into laws. They've been formulated into laws. There's lots of norms, obviously, that aren't made into laws. I mean, I don't think it's illegal in a lot of places for the Mr. Speedo to walk into a grocery store. It's certainly bad taste, and for me, and I suspect a lot of other people, but it's not necessarily breaking the law, just violating norms. That's one of the main reasons to keep these things separate. At the same time, there's certainly a relationship. What becomes laws were in a lot of cases, and maybe even most cases, norms before, but there needed to be one more step taken to ensure that they're either not violated or that people in their behavior conform to those norms. And by the way, that's where this idea of social control comes in. Obviously, law enforcement is one form of social control, kind of you might say today in modern society, especially sort of the last resort. But there's all sorts of other social controls. The guy. I'm sorry, fourth time I mentioned it. The guy in the grocery store, the Speedo, people kind of give him dirty looks, or probably more likely he ends up in the produce section and everybody else is in the other, on the other side of the store, and he's wondering, what's going on. That's a form of social sanction. I want to be away from anyone that's like this. That sends a message that person's violating norms, and may or may not be pleasant to that person. So that's what's meant by social control, and so we will always consider social control in relation to deviance as well. Another thing too that's important about deviance as well, in the book will mention. There's always an element of social conflict. It's deviance for whom? What's deviant to one group of people might be completely conformative or normatively upright to another group, and that too is very interesting sociologically and something to consider. Think about prohibition. Even if you're not someone who drinks, you could certainly doesn't because you don't like to drink doesn't necessarily mean that you want it to be illegal for other people to drink. But think about that. That was a time when something that's fairly normal to most people, having a drink every now and then, it becomes a deviant act, and in fact, during Prohibition, an act that then becomes illegal. But I think today we look back and a lot of us think, well, why did that happen? that was something that obviously a lot of people wanted to do because it didn't work. But also, you think about, well, that was a product too of political mobilization. There's groups of people that didn't want people to drink. In a lot of cases they have very good reasons for this, but and so they were able to get to have those norms, those sets of norms enforced and made into laws, and such that acts that hitherto were not treated as deviant then became deviant and even outlawed, and therefore social subject to some of the strongest forms of social control. There you see an example of where deviance, not just in the eye of the beholder, but it's part of a political process, a process of social conflict between different groups of people. So that's always important too to consider. And again, that's where this sort of objective perspective needs to come from. It's very hard to think about that, certainly in the case of the tragedy with the police officers in Las Vegas, but at the same time, you should ask for whom, what groups of people, what sort of mindset could see that as a morally permissible act, as something good. Think about ISIS and a lot of the things going on in the Middle East. That there's a mindset that somehow that these things are okay to do and in fact good to do, and that's an objective fact that mindset is there, and that it leads people to do these sorts of things. Therefore, it is something that needs to be considered and looked at, and try to consider as much as possible from the other person's point of view, even though it's something that's perhaps impossible to understand for a lot of us. So those are some of the main things I wanted to mention. Again, we will talk about crime a little bit. One of the things I'm having us read, something I've wanted to read for quite a while, is an ethnography. Ethnography is a sort of method used in sociology of actually just going out into the social world and either participating in whatever it is you're wanting to study or interviewing people. So in this case, it was a Harvard PhD student who became a police officer for a year in Baltimore, and he's doing the ethnography of policing in Baltimore. And then, it's mostly about the police and his experiences there. But at the same time, obviously, police in the inner city are dealing with a lot of different types of deviance as well, and so we get to see both. So I think that's very interesting, and so we'll spend some time with that. But I'm sure it will be very instructive for a lot of different reasons. A little bit about me, just to kind of tell you about my own habits as a lecturer and teacher. I'm generally very laid back. People perceive that pretty quickly, and I can be pretty informal in class, even though I'm very serious about lecturing and talking about the topic and kind of uncovering the things that are important, being able to apply theories and knowledge that we learn. But I can still be fairly informal. The reason I'm telling you that, I think most people like that, but at the same time, it potentially send mixed signals. I'm informal, laid back, but I am pretty demanding in terms of, I expect you to read, I expect you to understand, I expect you to be thoughtful about things, my tests can be pretty demanding. I tend to weigh them pretty heavily towards difficult questions that make you have to think, read carefully, think, take some logical steps, and so on. And that sort of contrasts very much with my sort of laid-back character. So just do keep that in mind, and it's something to consider whether or not you can deal with. I mean, it's not even a matter really of dealing with ambiguity, but it's something that you do have to actively consider and keep in mind. So anyway, that said, in terms of my teaching, I don't like to lecture the whole time. Sometimes I do, just because there's a lot to cover. I like a division of labor between myself and the book. I expect you to read the book, and it'll be necessary, for you to do the readings. Certainly for the test, you'll need to. You can't get away with just doing one or the other, reading and not coming to class, or just coming to class without reading. You got to do both. My lectures will not correspond one-to-one with reading. I'm not going to read the book in class. In fact, I might not even refer to, in many cases, I might not refer to it a lot, to a particular reading a lot, or I might just refer to some of the examples that it provides. My lectures, a lot of times I'll provide context, historical context maybe, by the way, which is another way to think about deviance as well. Always ask, when we consider any form of deviance, whether or not this is considered deviant everywhere, or has been considered deviant at all times. Was this deviant in Roman society? In ancient Rome, was it deviant 200 years ago? And so on. Because once you do that, and maybe the answer is it wasn't deviant then you ask why. What norms did they have in the other contexts that were such that that this act wasn't deviant, and what are the norms now that make that act deviant? So, in order to do that, I might provide us some historical background in a lot of cases. I might augment things the book says. I might fill in gaps, things that the book didn't cover that I think it should have. I might elaborate on something in the book might have. By the way, the textbook that we have, there's some, leaves some things to be desired, but we can always kvetch about the book. That's always fine. Blame it on the book. But anyway, hopefully that gives you enough information. Oh yeah, I do use a lot of personal anecdotes. I think that can turn off some people, but I think most people do like it. Most people tell me that they do. It helps to be concrete, and that's one way to do it, to give some vivid examples. But a lot of them are from my own experience. I think I do ethnography quite a bit myself, and I think that's partly a reason too that I do anecdotes. That when you're doing ethnography, you're there, taking part, and so me having that bent, it's quite natural that I'll talk about things as I've experienced them, but at the same time trying to making sure that that translates to other people's experience. That I will give you enough that you can sort of empathize with it, or think about something similar that happened to you, and so on. So anyway, I think that's the main stuff I wanted to talk about this first time. Ironically, we're not together today, but you've probably spent more time watching this than we would have had we been together, because I probably wouldn't have most of your professors probably just handed out the syllabus, talked about it a little bit, and then we all would have scooted. But that wasn't the case, since I've been away. So anyway, that's it. But hopefully, again, you know, the main purpose here is to kind of give you a taste of what the class is going to be like and what I'm like as well. So for Wednesday, please do get the syllabus, read it, come with any questions that you have, and answer it. You know, again, I'm not going to read the syllabus in class. You all can do that. Do it outside of class. You know, we'll just refer to it, and then you can ask questions. So anyway, glad you're here. I hope that you stick around and take this course. But certainly, you know, if you get a bad vibe about it, or you know, you're unsure, either you know, come talk to me, or ask questions, or you know, go elsewhere. So I certainly understand. You know, some professors are you get on with pretty well, some you don't, and it just varies by person. So you know, it's quite understandable. So anyway, thanks, and I hope to see you over this semester, and it's going to be an interesting semester. So take care.